By the time Claire Bennett turned onto Willow Creek Road, the sun was already sliding low behind the pines, throwing long shadows over the cracked pavement and the old mailboxes that leaned toward the road like tired men. She had not driven this way in almost 6 years, and yet her hand still knew every turn before the signs came into view. Some roads do that. They stay in your body even after you swear you are done with them. At 68, Claire had built a life in Boston that ran on order, calendars, and quiet control. She had spent 32 years as a hospital administrator, where everything depended on timing, documentation, and decisions that left no room for sentiment. Even after retirement, she still folded dish towels in exact thirds and kept her legal pad beside her kitchen phone. Her daughter said Claire scheduled emotions the same way other people schedule dentist appointments. Maybe she did. Her mother had been gone 11 months, and Claire had delayed this trip as long as she could. The lawyer had called twice. The realtor had called 3 times. The roof on the old house needed attention, the taxes were coming due, and someone had to decide what would stay and what would go. Someone, as usual, was Claire. The Bennett house sat at the end of a gravel drive, white once, now faded into a tired shade between cream and grey. The wraparound porch sagged slightly on the left side. Wind chimes hung near the front steps, giving off a thin hollow music in the evening breeze. Claire killed the engine and sat there for a moment with both hands on the steering wheel. She had told herself this was a practical visit. 3 days, maybe 4. Meet the realtor. Sort the papers. Box the keepsakes. Sell the house. That was the plan. Plans always made her feel safer. She stepped out of the car, straightened her navy coat, and reached for her overnight bag. Then she heard it. A noise from the detached garage. Not loud. Not violent. Just the dull scrape of something being moved across concrete. Claire froze. The house had been empty for months. Her brother lived in Arizona and had made it very clear that he would be supportive from a distance, which was his polished way of saying he had no intention of coming. The neighbors were older now. Half the people she remembered had either moved or died. There should have been no one here. She set her bag down quietly and walked toward the garage, every step measured, her pulse beating harder than she wanted to admit. The side door was cracked open. Light spilled through the gap. Claire pushed it wider. An older black man stood inside beside a wooden workbench, his shoulders broad but bent a little by the years. He wore a faded denim jacket over a thermal shirt, and his hands were wrapped around a small metal toolbox as if he had just lifted it off the floor. He turned when he heard the door, and his expression changed not to fear, not to guilt, but to something closer to recognition. "Oh," he said softly. "You're Claire." It was not a question. Claire stiffened. "Who are you?" The man set the toolbox down carefully, like somebody who respected things that had belonged to other people. "My name is Isaiah Cole." She did not move from the doorway. "Why are you in my mother's garage?" Isaiah looked around the room before answering, as if the air itself deserved honesty. "Because your mother asked me to come after she was gone." Claire gave a short, disbelieving laugh. "I'm sorry. She said there'd be a letter in the kitchen drawer for you. Said if you found me here before you found that letter, I was supposed to tell you exactly that and nothing more." Claire stared at him. Her mother, Ruth Bennett, had been gone nearly a year. Ruth had been a church-going widow with soft cardigans, sensible shoes, and a peach pie recipe half the county still talked about. She volunteered at the library on Wednesdays and sent birthday cards with $2 bills tucked inside for every grandchild. Claire knew her mother's habits. Her routines. Her blood pressure medication schedule. She did not know anything about an elderly stranger in the garage. "I think," Claire said slowly, "you need to leave." Isaiah nodded once. No argument. No wounded pride. "I understand." Then he added, "But before I go, you may want to look in the second drawer beside the stove. Back corner. Under the recipe cards." Something cold and uneasy moved through her chest. He had said that too specifically to be bluffing. Claire left him standing in the garage and walked fast to the kitchen, her heels sharp against the old pine floor. The room looked exactly the way her mother had left it in Claire's memory: yellow curtains over the sink, ceramic rooster cookie jar, a calendar still hanging crooked near the fridge though it had been months since anyone turned the page. She went to the drawer beside the stove. Pulled it open. Recipe cards. Rubber bands. A church bulletin. A dull peeler. Her hand moved to the back. There was an envelope. Claire. Just her name, written in her mother's careful script. For 1 second, she could not breathe. She stood there staring at it while the refrigerator hummed and a faucet somewhere in the house gave one tired drip. Then she opened it. Sweetheart. If you are reading this, then I suppose Isaiah arrived before you had time to get angry with me in private, which means I owe you the truth at last. Please don't send him away before you hear what I should have told you years ago. He is not a stranger to me. And if I did one thing right in the second half of my life, it was saying yes the day God put him on my porch. Claire read that line twice. Then a third time. The kitchen around her seemed to tilt, not enough to make her fall, just enough to unsettle every neat label she had ever placed on her mother's life. She went back to the garage with the letter still in her hand. Isaiah had not moved much. He stood where she had left him, hands folded now, his face lined and tired in a way that made him look less like an intruder and more like a man who had spent years carrying something heavy without complaint. My mother, Claire said, her voice thinner than she wanted, put you on her porch. A faint smile touched his mouth, but it carried no humor. No, life did that. Your mother just opened the door. Claire looked at him more closely now. Really looked. He was maybe in his early 70s. His hair was mostly silver at the temples. One of his fingers curved slightly, as if it had been broken long ago and healed without the luxury of proper treatment. There was wear in his jacket, but it was clean. His boots had been resoled more than once. He did not look like a liar. He looked like a man who had learned not to waste words. What are you talking about? Claire asked. Isaiah glanced toward an old cedar chest in the corner of the garage. Your mother kept some things out here. Said someday they'd help explain it better than I could. He paused. But I can tell you this much. 21 years ago, I was sleeping in my truck behind Miller's feed store. I had lost my wife. Lost my job at the plant. Lost just about everything except my son. And one rainy afternoon, your mother found us. Claire felt her grip tighten around the letter. My mother didn't tell me any of this. No, Isaiah said quietly. She didn't. The answer should have irritated her. Instead, it landed like grief. Because that was the thing about losing a parent late in life. You think the shocks are over. You think whatever can be discovered has already been discovered. Then suddenly a stranger is standing in a garage telling you your mother had a whole chapter you were never invited to read. From the driveway came the sound of another car slowing, then moving on. The house settled with a faint creak. Somewhere in the trees, a bird called once and fell silent. Claire looked from Isaiah to the cedar chest, then back to the letter in her hand. What exactly, she said, her voice low now, did my mother do? Isaiah's eyes softened in a way that made him look suddenly older than before. She saved my boy, he said. And after that, she spent the next 20 years saving a whole lot more people than either of us can count. Claire said nothing. Because for the first time in her carefully managed life, she had no ready-made response. And deep down, before he said another word, she already knew this trip was not going to end with a realtor's sign in the yard and a clean signature on a closing form. It was going to end somewhere else. Somewhere her mother had been trying to lead her all along. Claire did not sit right away. She stood in the garage with the evening cold moving in through the open side door, her mother's letter trembling slightly in her hand, though she would have denied that to anyone who asked. Isaiah waited without pushing, which unsettled her more than insistence would have. Most people, when they had something dramatic to reveal, hurried toward it. They wanted the reaction. They wanted the center of the room. Isaiah Cole seemed like a man who had spent a lifetime standing just outside it. Finally Claire said, "Start from the beginning." He nodded and pulled 2 old lawn chairs away from the wall. One still had a faded floral cushion tied to it with fraying string. He wiped the dust off the other with his sleeve before offering it to her. The gesture was so simple and unshowy that she sat before she fully realized she was doing it. The garage smelled like old lumber, motor oil, and the lavender sachets her mother used to tuck into drawers because she said every room ought to have at least one thing in it that reminded you life could still be gentle. Isaiah lowered himself into the second chair. "My son's name is Daniel," he said. "He was 10 when your mother found us. Smart kid. Quiet. The kind that watched everything before he said a word." Claire folded the letter carefully and put it in her coat pocket. This was in 2004. Just about. He rubbed one hand slowly over his knee as he spoke, like the story lived not only in his mind but in the old pain of his body. "I worked 23 years at the paper mill over in Hadley. Thought I'd retire from there. Then the cuts came, one round after another. My wife Livin got sick not long after that. Pancreatic cancer. By the time the insurance battles were done, we had sold most of what wasn't nailed down. She lasted 9 months. Maybe 10 if you're feeling generous." He gave a small breath that was not quite a laugh. "When she died, something in me went with her. I kept trying to hold the edges together for Daniel, but grief's expensive, and so is being poor in America. Truck got repossessed once. I got it back. Then I lost the apartment. Slept in the truck after that. Told Daniel it was temporary, like a camping trip. Kids want to believe you, so he did." Claire said nothing. Not because she had no thoughts, but because there were too many. Her mother had known this. Known a man and child were living in a truck less than 15 miles from the church she attended every Sunday. Isaiah continued. "One afternoon it was raining hard. Real cold kind of rain. Daniel had a fever. I was parked behind Miller's feed store because the owner usually let me stay after hours if I kept out of sight. Your mother came by to drop off blankets for the animal shelter. She saw the truck. Saw me trying to cool Daniel down with wet paper towels from the gas station restroom. His eyes moved to the concrete floor, but his voice never broke. She didn't ask why I hadn't fixed my life. Didn't ask what mistakes I'd made. Didn't give me that look people get when they're deciding how close your bad luck might get to their clean shoes. She just said, 'That child needs a bed tonight.'" Claire closed her eyes briefly. That sounded like Ruth. Not the facts of it. Not the secret itself. But the sentence. The plainness. The absence of performance. "What did she do?" Claire asked. "Took us to the motel on Route 11 first. Paid for 3 nights. Came back the next morning with cough medicine, clean socks, and a casserole in one of those blue dishes old church women think nobody notices they never get back." Despite herself, Claire almost smiled. Isaiah saw it and nodded. "Yep. One of those." Then his expression turned serious again. "But she didn't stop there. That was the thing about your mother. Most folks are willing to help you through a moment. A meal. A coat. $50 and a prayer. She stayed for the part after that. The part nobody wants because it takes time." He told Claire how Ruth had called an old friend at the elementary school and gotten Daniel enrolled without making him wait through district delays. How she had marched into the county office with a folder under her arm and refused to leave until somebody explained why a laid-off man with a sick child was still lost in processing. How she convinced Pastor Milton to let Isaiah do repair work at the church in exchange for a small room in the basement until something better opened up. She said dignity matters as much as help, Isaiah murmured. Said if people lose one, they usually lose the other not long after. Claire looked at the cedar chest in the corner. "What's in there?" Isaiah turned his head toward it. "Things she kept. Letters mostly. Drawings. Maybe records. She used to write things down. Claire rose and went to the chest. The hinges groaned when she opened it. Inside were manila folders, neatly labeled in her mother's handwriting. Meal train, Harper family. Bus pass fund. School coats. Daniel Cole reading awards. Emergency utility help. Quiet ledger. Claire stared at the last one. Quiet ledger. She picked it up. Inside was a ruled notebook. Dates. Names. Small amounts. Sometimes no amounts at all, just notes. Paid Mr. Jensen's electric before shut-off. Don't tell him it was me. Mrs. Alvarez needs rides to dialysis on Tuesdays. Ask Norma if she still drives. Daniel Cole, new winter boots, size 4. Said he likes red laces. Call Frank at hardware store about part-time work for Isaiah. He is good with his hands. Remember, help should feel like a hand, not a spotlight. Claire sat back down slowly, the notebook open in her lap. This went on for years. Isaiah smiled, but there was sorrow in it. Longer than you probably want to know. The hurt came fast then, sharp enough to surprise her? She never told me. It came out harsher than intended. Isaiah did not flinch. No. Why? He looked at her for a long moment, and Claire realized he was deciding whether honesty would wound more than silence. Then he chose honesty. Because she thought you wouldn't understand then. Claire's jaw tightened. That's convenient. No, he said softly. It was sad. The word landed cleanly between them. Sad. Not angry. Not judgmental. Not condemning. Just sad. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Your mother talked about you all the time. Your articles, your awards, the hospital expansion project, your grandkids. She carried pictures in her purse till the corners bent. But every time I asked why she didn't tell you more about this work, she'd say the same thing. Claire's throat felt dry. What did she say? Isaiah answered without dramatics, without trying to make it sound prettier than it was. She said, Claire loves me. I know she does. But she has spent so long surviving by being efficient that I'm afraid she no longer recognizes the value of things that can't be measured. For a second Claire felt the old instinct rise in her, the one that had protected her for decades. Defend. Explain. Clarify. Talk about bills and deadlines and the fact that caring for people in hospitals required more than warm feelings. It required systems. Leadership. Hard calls. But none of that came out. Because deep down, beneath the polished arguments and the practiced competence, she knew what her mother had meant. Claire had become excellent at handling what could be counted. What she had not known how to handle was need that arrived messy, unplanned, and without paperwork. She turned another page in the notebook. There were names she recognized from town and names she didn't. Widows. Teen mothers. A veteran named Lou. A teacher with ovarian cancer. A family whose trailer had burned. People Ruth Bennett had somehow found, or who had somehow found her. Not grand gestures. Specific ones. Groceries. Rent. Tutoring. Tires. A lawyer's phone number. A place at someone's table. She did all this by herself. Claire asked. Isaiah shook his head. No, That was the brilliance of it. She made it look like she was helping people, but really she was teaching other people how to do it too. She'd call one person for plumbing, another for rides, another for school supplies. She'd say, nobody gets to sit this one out just because the trouble belongs to somebody else. Claire lowered the notebook. The image of her mother in her mind had always been too small. Not wrong, exactly. Just smaller than the real thing. Ruth Bennett had been kind. Claire knew that. What she had not known was that kindness, in her mother's hands, had been organized. Intentional. Persistent. Almost fierce. Where is Daniel now? Claire asked quietly. Isaiah's whole face changed then. The heaviness remained, but pride moved through it like light through old stained glass. He's a high school principal in Columbus, Ohio. Married. 2 girls. Sends me pictures every Sunday and pretends he isn't checking whether I took my blood pressure pills. Claire let out the breath she'd been holding. My mother kept in touch. Till the end. Isaiah reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded paper, worn soft at the creases. Last birthday card she sent him. Came 2 weeks before she passed. He handed it to her. Inside, in Ruth's neat script. Dear Daniel. You were 10 when we met, and now look at you, raising girls of your own and guiding other people's children every day. Don't ever let anybody make you feel like where you started gets the last word. It doesn't. It never did. Love always. Miss Ruth. Claire stared at the card until the words blurred. When she finally looked up, the garage scene changed somehow. Not physically. It was still the same old room with rakes on the wall and winter tires stacked near the workbench. But now it felt inhabited by a life she had overlooked in plain sight. My mother was dying, Claire said. Why didn't she tell me then? Isaiah's answer was almost a whisper. She thought maybe actions would reach you better than explanations. The night had gone fully dark outside. The light over the workbench cast a dim yellow circle across the floor. Claire could hear insects buzzing against the screen by the side door. For the first time since her mother's funeral, grief stopped feeling like a closed room and started feeling like a hallway. A long one. With doors on both sides she had never opened. What happens now? She asked. Isaiah glanced toward the kitchen door that led into the house. That, he said gently, depends on whether you came here to sell a property. He paused. Or to discover what your mother was really trying to leave you. Claire barely slept that night. She lay in her old bedroom beneath a quilt her mother had sewn sometime in the late 1980s, staring at the ceiling fan as it turned slow circles in the dark. Every so often the house made one of its familiar sounds, a pipe settling, a board shifting, the soft rattle of branches against the gutter outside. Sounds she had known as a child, then as a young woman home for holidays, then as a dutiful daughter on shorter and shorter visits. Now each sound seemed to ask the same question. How much had you missed while thinking you understood everything? At 5:30 in the morning, Claire gave up on sleep and went to the kitchen. She found the coffee tin exactly where Ruth had always kept it, beside the sugar jar and the chipped ceramic spoon rest-shaped like a leaf. Making coffee there felt strangely intimate, almost intrusive, like repeating a prayer in somebody else's church. She stood at the sink with the mug warming her hands and watched dawn come up over the backyard. At 7, she called the realtor and cancelled their afternoon meeting. At 7:15, she called the lawyer and asked him not to list the house for sale. At 7:30, she went out to the garage. Isaiah was already there, tightening the handle on an old push mower. He looked up but did not seem surprised to see her. I made coffee, Claire said. He set the screwdriver down. Then I'd be a fool not to come inside. They sat at the kitchen table where her mother had probably planned 100 quiet rescues over tea and grocery lists. Morning light came through the yellow curtains, turning the room softer than Claire remembered. She brought the quiet ledger, the birthday card, and the rest of the folders from the cedar chest. I want to understand what she was doing, Claire said. All of it. Isaiah wrapped both hands around his mug and nodded. Then you'll need more than me. Over the next 2 days, Claire met people she had never known her mother had touched. There was Lorraine Haskins, a retired school bus driver with oxygen tubes beneath her nose, who told Claire that Ruth had sat with her husband every Tuesday at the cancer center so Lorraine could go home and shower without feeling guilty. There was Miguel Alvarez, who remembered Claire's mother bringing groceries during the winter his wife couldn't work and never once making them feel like charity cases. There was Pastor Milton, who laughed through tears when he described Ruth as the only woman in 3 counties who could rebuke you, recruit you, and hand you a pound cake in the same conversation. Again and again Claire heard the same themes. Your mother showed up. Your mother listened first. Your mother never made help feel humiliating. Your mother remembered what mattered. By the third day, Claire stopped introducing herself as Ruth Bennett's daughter with polite distance. She started saying it with wonder. Late Friday afternoon, she drove to the old brick fellowship hall behind First Baptist, where Isaiah said her mother had kept a monthly supper going for years, not officially through the church, not funded by any committee, just a standing meal where folks could come eat, rest, and leave with whatever practical help could be arranged before dessert. The hall smelled like coffee, ham, floor polish, and old hymnals. 3 folding tables had already been set up. A woman in a red sweater was slicing cornbread. 2 teenage boys were stacking paper plates. In the corner, a lanky man in his 40s was fixing a loose leg on one of the chairs. Isaiah stepped inside and people greeted him like family. Then heads turned toward Claire. For one uncomfortable second she felt the old professional instinct rise again, the one that wanted to stand straight, speak clearly, and keep vulnerability behind glass. But there was no boardroom here. No podium. No polished reason to hide. A woman she didn't know walked over, took Claire's hand in both of hers, and said, "Your mama was the first person who treated me like I was still worth talking to after my husband went to prison." Another man said, "She got my boy a tutor when we couldn't afford one." A teenage girl said, "Miss Ruth helped me fill out my nursing school application." An older veteran in a ball cap touched the brim and said, "Your mother knew the difference between pity and respect." Not many do. Claire stood there in the middle of that fellowship hall, holding all those sentences at once, and felt something in her finally give way. Not collapse. Not weakness. Release. Her mother had not left her a secret life in order to shame her. She had left it because she hoped, maybe even believed, that one day Claire would be ready to inherit it. That evening, after the supper ended and the last casserole dish was wrapped and carried home, Claire stayed behind to help wipe down tables. She was not very efficient at it. She missed crumbs. Stacked chairs unevenly. Forgot where the extra trash bags were stored. But nobody corrected her with impatience. They simply worked around her and with her, the way people do when the goal is not perfection but presence. When the room had emptied, Isaiah found her standing beside the coffee urn. "You look tired," he said. "I am tired." He smiled. Different kind than before. Claire leaned one hip against the table. "I spent most of my adult life believing responsibility meant being the one who kept everything controlled." She looked around the hall. "My mother seems to have believed responsibility meant being interruptible." Isaiah's eyes lit with quiet approval. "That sounds like her." Claire was silent for a moment. Then she said the thing that had been forming all day. "I'm not selling the house." He nodded as if he had suspected that before she did. "I want to use it," she continued. "Not as a museum." She wouldn't have wanted that. But maybe as a place where some of this can continue. Temporary stays. Meals. Resource meetings. Maybe a small emergency fund. Nothing flashy. Isaiah let out a slow breath and looked toward the window, where twilight was settling blue over the church parking lot. "She'd like that," he said. "No," Claire said, and for the first time there was a softness in her voice that did not feel like weakness. She'd ask whether it helps the right people for the right reasons. And if the answer got too fancy, she'd tell me to start over. Isaiah laughed out loud then, a deep worn laugh that made the room feel warmer. "Now that," he said, "sounds exactly like Ruth Bennett." 3 months later, the house on Willow Creek Road had a new sign out front. Not for sale. A small wooden one near the porch steps, painted by hand. The open table. No logo. No donor wall. No ribbon cutting. Inside, the front bedroom became a short-term room for women and children in transition. The den held shelves of food, blankets, and school supplies. The kitchen came alive again twice a week with hot meals and coffee strong enough to wake the dead. A retired accountant volunteered to help people with paperwork. A mechanic from town fixed cars when he could. Pastor Milton referred families quietly. Daniel Cole drove in from Ohio one weekend with his wife and daughters and cried in the driveway before he ever made it to the porch. And Claire? Claire did not become her mother. She remained herself, orderly, sharp, sometimes too direct, still capable of turning generosity into a checklist when she got nervous. But she learned to stay seated when a story ran long. She learned not to answer every problem in the first 30 seconds. She learned that some of the most important work in a person's life never appears on an annual report. One spring afternoon, almost a year after she had first found Isaiah in the garage, Claire stood at Greenwood Cemetery beside her mother's grave with a mason jar full of wild daisies in her hands. Not roses from the florist. Not lilies chosen for elegance. Just roadside daisies, the kind Ruth loved because, as Isaiah had once told her, they never tried to be anything other than what they were. Isaiah stood nearby, older now in the sunlight, but steady. Daniel was there too, along with his daughters. A few others came as well, people whose lives had once crossed Ruth Bennett's kitchen, her church table, her old station wagon, her impossible little web of practical mercy. Claire knelt and placed the jar at the foot of the headstone. Then she rested her fingers against the cool stone and spoke quietly. "You were bigger than the version of you I kept in my head," she said. "I'm sorry it took me this long to see it." Her voice shook, but she did not fight it. "I used to think inheritance was money, land, jewelry, something you could inventory. But that's not what you left me. You left me a responsibility. You left me people. You left me a table, and the nerve to keep a chair open." Wind moved softly through the grass. Behind her, one of Daniel's little girls laughed at something Isaiah said. Claire smiled through tears. Because that was the thing she understood now, too late to tell her mother in person but not too late to live it. The real legacy of a good life is not what you accumulate. It is what keeps moving through other people because you were here. When Claire stood, Isaiah offered his arm without ceremony, and she took it. Together they walked back toward the gravel path where the others waited. No speeches. No grand conclusions. Just people, alive and imperfect, carrying forward what one ordinary woman had chosen to do with the years she was given. And for the first time in a very long time, Claire Bennett did not feel like a woman closing a chapter. She felt like someone finally opening the right door.